It's time to turn to the WUKY sports page with your host, Keith Elkins, revealing conversations and stories you thought you knew from prominent Kentucky sports figures. Now, here once again is Keith Elkins.
Jerry Tipton is with us today. We are welcoming Jerry back for a part two in our podcast, and we're glad to have him with us again. Jerry covered University of Kentucky basketball for 41 seasons, as I reintroduce you, before he retired in 2022. He was also on the UK football beat from 1981 through 86. A native of Hamtramck, Michigan, right? I got it right. Correct. That time, and came to Lexington from Huntington, West Virginia, where he attended Marshall University and then later worked for the Huntington Herald-Dispatch. He was inducted into the U.S. Basketball Writers Association Hall of Fame in 2005, the Marshall University Journalism Hall of Fame in 2018, and the Kentucky Journalism Hall of Fame in 2020. And he has recently written a book titled Deja Blue, Sportswriter Reflects on 41 Seasons of Kentucky Basketball. And as mentioned, Jerry was with us a few weeks ago, and we invite you to listen to that podcast on our WUKY Sports Page podcast page as part of the WUKY webpage. And we covered a lot of ground in that interview, I think, Jerry, but there were some things that we'd like to get to today. And also, you've got a special occasion coming up. You've been invited to the Kentucky Book Festival. So let's talk about that right away and tell us about that and what it means to you.
Well, it was a thrill to be invited. This is some of the best. I kind of shy away from the title of author. I just think of myself as a newspaper reporter, and then I tried to put together a memoir, but I don't consider myself an author. But
somehow that has a different connotation, I guess, to it. If you want to look at it like that, and in fact, I was going to even ask you about that. I mean, you're a writer, a great reporter, all these years, but it is a little different step for you, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, it was a whole trying to put together a book was a whole different experience. I think I said the last time I was on, there was a lot of anxiety involved about, can I do this? This was a whole new experience. I'd never done this. And I would have anxiety from time to time doing a newspaper story, which is a lot shorter, obviously, than a book. So I had to really talk myself into, yes, I think I can do this. And then the next wave of anxiety was, okay, how to do it, how to organize it, how to put it together. And, eventually I put it together and talked to more than 40 people to get their thoughts and memories, because I didn't want to keep myself to a minimum, even though it is a memoir.
Mm-hmm. And it is a whole different kind of stress or pressure on the author to get the book prepared, because as a newspaper reporter, you're facing those deadlines every day. And while that's certainly stressful, but it's a whole different kind of stress to look at that long-term project, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we're like you said, with 41 seasons, so there's a lot of memories and maybe a lot of forgetfulness in there too. So I had to kind of do some research and kind of remember, make lists of things that I remembered and try to include those, in there. But the organizational thing was a big thing, a big problem or anxiety to try to. I mean, I thought chronologically with the 6 UK basketball coaches made sense, but the overall, how to organize it was a real worrisome thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, you got it organized and it's complete now. You hold it in your hands, and I'm sure there's a little bit of anxiety the first one you hold in your hands to actually look back through it and see all those words in print and available for purchase and consumption.
Well, yeah, I mean, I had a friend edit it, and I tried to edit it, but when the first edition came out, we saw some things that needed attention. So we kind of re-edited it another time, and Lord knows if there's further need of editing. Hopefully not.
Well, you'll have a chance to promote it at the Kentucky Book Festival. And are you familiar? Have you been to the event and seen the format of it or how it works? Or?
Not really. I mean, I think one year John Meacham was one of the authors, and he spoke at a separate thing in that area, it's at Joseph Beth.
Right, November 2nd.
November 2nd. And he spoke at another thing there at Lexington Green. But that's the closest I've come. And so this is going to be a new experience, and I'll have to kind of see how that goes. But it's, I'm looking forward to it. And one of the people I talked to for my memoir was Frank X. Walker, former poet laureate for Kentucky. And he's one of the authors there this year. So I talked to him on the phone. We had a nice conversation. And I'm hoping to meet him face to face and thank him for the help.
And one way that you organized the book was that you went back and did a lot of interviews recently to follow up with people like Mike Johnson, the sports editor of the Herald-Leader at the time, who hired you, and many others, to just sort of recheck things or get their perspective, I guess, from say the 1980s for a player or two, as opposed to today. And that seemed to add a fresh angle to the book. Is that what you were looking for with that?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to give it something of a historical feel and not just me. And Mike, I remember, told me about a local radio person, and I'm not sure who it was, who said something to callers or listeners, I'm sorry, about, maybe taking aim at me at Rupp Arena. And I think it was said in jest.
Oh, let's hope so.
But nowadays, but I wasn't aware of that, or if they told me, I think I would have remembered that. So I think maybe, but they did say they told the police, and so the police were aware of this. But there was never any, as far as I know, any aiming at me, hopefully.
But verbally, the fans could respond in such a way, and you quote a few of them in the book, and there were some people who had just terrible reactions to what you had written and blaming you for different things that might have been going on. And there may not be actual threats, but they certainly made it sound like they were headed in that direction, didn't they?
Yeah, I did the chapter on fans, and I chuckled several times while putting it together, just remembering things that were said. A lot of times, face to face, there wasn't. I don't remember much nastiness or anything like that. But the internet and sending emails, I guess people feel freer to be more threatening, if that's the right word, but be more angry. And I always liked feedback, positive, negative, whatever. And so if someone sent me an email, I would try to respond if I could think of a way to politely respond. Now, there were some times when I couldn't think of how to respond in a polite way, but for the most part, I would. And that seemed to calm things down.
That seems to have been a trait of yours through all of this, because your whole approach to the job is to be the objective reporter and not get caught up in those things. And coaches would say things, and of course you're in the position usually of not responding because you don't want to be part of the story. And same way I would think with fans. But that was an important part of your success, I would think, as a writer. Would you see it that way?
Well, I just was, I also did a chapter on hard questions. Somehow I got a reputation for asking quote unquote hard questions. And what I was trying to do was ask good questions. I was thinking about the story. And I would also think about if I was a reader, what question would come to mind as I was reading the story, and I would try to ask that to try to improve the story. That wasn't Tubby Smith spoke at the launch of the book, and I went up to him beforehand, and we had a nice conversation, and I told him, about hard questions. I was never trying to pin anyone against the wall. And he said, that's right. Yeah, you were trying to nail people against the wall. He was kidding, I think.
You mentioned talking about the fans, writing about the fans in the book, and there were several examples that you used, a reaction to a number 2 ranking in the country for Kentucky, and when you contacted the editors one of the editors who put that together, he said the reaction was very negative because they thought they should be number 1, right? And then worst 22-4 team in history. I think was a caller's opinion back in 1998.
I think Tubby's first year.
Right, when they were actually...
They lost to Ole Miss at home.
Yes.
And in the post-game radio show, I think a caller said this was the worst 22-4 team he'd ever seen.
Yeah.
And I remember Tom Leach saying, the host, the radio host, saying something to the effect of, that was like saying you were dating the least attractive supermodel.
Yeah, and you had one more, too, in the 2014-15 season, which was the 38-1 team. And there was a caller who had a long list of things that could be improved, and John Robick was filling in for John Calipari at that time, and he pointed out that they were doing fairly well at the time.
Yeah, he didn't say it like lashing back or anything. It was just sort of like, making the point, and it was fairly lighthearted in how he said it. Yeah.
Yeah, and they were, I think, 24-0 at the time.
Right,
so
they were undefeated.
But the whole
before losing.
Yeah, tying it. Yeah, right before losing at the end. Yeah, and but tying the whole thing together though was just the expectations, and it's all just part of this program and something that you saw over the course of these 41 years.
Yeah, I didn't fully appreciate that when I first came. I knew Kentucky was a blue blood program in basketball, but I didn't realize that. The fans were, they elevated it well beyond blue blood. Mm-hmm. It was really the only program with blood. I used to think of it as like they saw Kentucky as the Harlem Globetrotters and everybody else was the Washington Generals. You have to have that other team out there to have a game, but their job was to lose to Kentucky.
Right.
And if they tried too hard to try to win, that was an insult.
Mm-hmm. And the comparison to religion is made frequently, but you had some discussion, some back and forth with your colleague at the Herald-Leader, Paul Prather, who actually writes about religion in his column. And,
right.
And so that became a point back and forth of you, mostly in jest, I think, but it was
lighthearted.
It was a way to demonstrate just how deep the affection or dedication of these fans was. Tell me about that.
Well, yeah, Paul sat next to me, and like you say, he covered like church news and other things going on spiritually, and of course I was covering Kentucky basketball, and we used to like playfully debate which one of us was really covering religion, and he said I did. And so, okay, I mean, I could see that I can see where that's kind of a spiritual thing for fans. Growing up, I became a Celtic fan, and way back then, there weren't so many games on TV like now. It was basically Sunday afternoon, the NBA game of the week, and when it was the Celtics, that was almost like going to church for me. Mm-hmm. It was that special. It was an elevated form of basketball, shall we say. So I could identify somewhat with the Kentucky fans.
One of the trademarks of your coverage of UK basketball was that Sunday notebook column, and that was something that was obviously very, very well read and appreciated by UK fans. Appreciated. Sometimes they disagreed with what you put in there, of course, but that's part of it. But they certainly read it and appreciated your coverage on that. Tell me about how that came about and what you looked for that Sunday column, because it was a big part of following UK.
Yeah, I was, I growing up and so on, like I say, I was a Celtic fan, and somehow I was able to watch or read the Boston Globe. Must have been at the library, and they had Sunday Notes columns, various like Bob Ryan, I believe, with the Celtics, and Peter Gammons was it with baseball, and I really enjoyed reading those. So that kind of that was kind of my experience. And then early on, back then we would fly to most of the away games and through Atlanta usually. And if they played an away game on Saturday and I'm coming back on Sunday, I would get the Atlanta paper on Sunday. And they had note columns, and they were fun to read. And so that's what kind of made me think I'd like to do that. And it was a really good way for enterprise, to go beyond just the day-by-day, common way to cover. It gave me a chance to kind of explore other story ideas as notes. And I thought, and it made me think about other full-fledged stories that I could work on. But I really thought that was very, very valuable as a spur, a motivating thing for me to move beyond just the daily stuff.
Yeah, and it's a good inspirational way to look at it from your standpoint. And then also, though, of course, it was that wasn't just basketball season, right? That was pretty much all year round, wasn't it?
Yeah, yes, it was. Yeah. And early on, I thought I was a little worried about it because, like, if it's July, what am I going to fill up that space? At the beginning, it was like 60, 65 inches. And, what am I going to do? But it didn't take long for me to realize there was always going to be some issues going on or something happening that you could explore. And, of course, there wasn't any basketball going on, so I had more time to devote to it. And one of the things, it always ended, if you remember, with birthdays.
Yes.
And I thought it helped humanize the players. That's kind of one of the thoughts I had, was they're people too. Yes, they are players, but they're people. They get older. And my favorite ones were the one where some player turned 50 or 60. Yeah. And it would, I hoped, drive home the point. They're people too.
You also, in the notes in particular, seem to be a good example of this, but over the course of your career, you made contacts with people that might not be considered traditional basketball figures, some professors who helped you out, the professor at Murray, I believe it was.
Right, yeah, you mentioned the fans, the chapter on fans. There's a professor at Murray, I believe he still is. He's a psychology professor, Dan Wan is his name, and he specialized in fan psychology. So whenever a story or a note pertained to fans, I would, and he was always pretty cooperative, I'd call him up and we'd talk about it. He'd put it in perspective for me. What does this mean, if anything? The fan did this. One example, the UK played in Las Vegas. The media seats were about 7 rows up from the baseline, one of the baselines, and the first 6 rows were fans. And they were right there reacting. And I don't remember who they were playing, but the other team was trying to take charges. And this irritated this one fan in particular. And he was angry and voiced his anger. And then at one point, they called blocking on the opposing player who tried to take a charge. So I thought the fan would be happy. No, he was still mad.
Yeah.
And so I thought, and I called the professor about it, and he not for the first time, he told me the mistake I was making was thinking fans in general are logical. They're not logical. And I've thought about it, and I think, I could identify with that to a degree. Because to me, trying to take a charge is not playing basketball. It's like, trying to put on an act so you can fall over. Right. And I don't like that. Not in my team has to win, but just play basketball. Don't pretend.
Yeah, and you have to, I guess, dump the original premise that fans are going to be logical, that they'll.
Yeah. There were several examples of that where he would say, "You're again thinking fans are logical."
You incorporated the Sunday notebook technique for one of your chapters in the book to get in some various topics that I know you considered well worth exploring, but maybe just couldn't fit them in as a full chapter or something. But,
I just thought it was like I was identified with that. So I thought while I was trying to think of that how do I organize this, I thought, hey, I could do a chapter in the Sunday notebook style. The notes are longer in the book form than they would be in the paper. In the paper, they might just be 2 or 3 paragraphs. But I remember one thing with the paper. It was somehow I got the idea of lookalikes. So I would have a photo of maybe a UK player, and then somebody that I thought they resembled. And that got a real reaction from readers, not negative. Just like, hey, you should, so-and-so looks like so-and-so, or that sort of thing. But people seem to really get into that.
If I remember one pairing, I was trying to think of it, Darren Feldhouse and Randy Travis, the country singer.
Oh, really?
I think that's who. I think that might have been who it was. But there were several pairings. That was a very popular.
Part of
feature
me wished I'd continued that.
Yeah.
Just because of the reaction.
Uh-huh.
It was just such a reaction from readers.
There was one of those note style accounts of a basketball game when the media played the UK staff. This was early in the Patino tenure, and the media people, I think, were hoping to have some fun, but the staff they wanted to make sure they put some points on the board, didn't they?
I never asked, but I always assumed they were trying to show the media this is the style of play. I don't remember them pressing and trapping, but maybe they did. But I remember the talk was that Rock Oliver, the strength coach, whoever he was guarding was somebody that the coaches weren't crazy about, shall we say. And he was guarding me. Yeah. So I only got off one shot, as I remember, and I missed. And to me, Tubby Smith, I think, scored like 36 points, something like that. And, it was fun. It wasn't anything nasty or anything.
Getting back to the notes column, you, as you said, put that together nearly every week, all year round. Did you think of that sometimes as an additional source of like, why did I do this? Is this a stressor, or did it really sort of flow once you got it going?
I thought of it as a positive thing in terms of spurring me to not just sit around. You know what I mean? So I was thinking about it 6 or 7 days a week. Yeah. And working on it through the week. So just, and I always started with the birthdays. That got me started. Yeah. So I wasn't having to fill the entire space.
Right.
But then, like if I could get a note or two per day by the end of the week, there might be some anxiety about the lead item. That was usually longer than just a quick note. But then after the lead one, it would just be a series of notes. And it was just a real spur to try harder.
Mm-hmm. Kentucky's games were so often nationally televised, and you would have a word with a Dick Vitale or a Jay Billis, people like that who were in town to do the games. What do you recall about those encounters and those relationships over the years?
Well, it was fun. That was also a case where you're trying to put something in perspective, usually. Mm-hmm. And so these guys had been around basketball forever, and so they could say, don't overreact to this. These things happen, that sort of thing. I'm trying to remember the guy. I think he lives in Colorado. Oh, I'm having a brain cramp here. But he's an analyst on college games for ESPN. Fran Fraschilla, maybe.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And I remember, I don't think I put it in the book, but one time somehow we were talking about jogging. He said he jogged, and I think it was like 4 or 5 miles a day, and he was living in the Rockies, so it wasn't level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I said, well, I jog, and I jog daily and however many miles, and I said, but I don't jog if it's raining. And he said, well, you know what that's called, right? And I said, no, what? He said, soft. So we laughed.
Always the coach.
Yes,
right? Yeah.
Yes, right.
Yeah. There used to be a feature a long time ago in the Reader's Digest, and that's I'm dating myself here by referring to Reader's Digest, but just trust me on this one, younger folks. But there was the regular feature that they did called The Most Unforgettable Character I've Ever Met. In 41 years, is there anyone who might be the most unforgettable character, or at least the one that comes to mind is someone who just would fall into that category?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. As Obviously through 41 years, there's just a whole bunch.
Sure.
The way I put it or think about it is like someone might ask me, who's the best player you saw? Mm-hmm. And it's like, gee, this is Kentucky. There were so many really good players. And I hate to single out one. To me, it's like if you asked me who's better, Larry Bird or Magic Johnson, gee, they're both really fantastic. And whoever you don't pick, the inference is, well, you didn't think that much of him. No, I think they're. But with Kentucky, the player that I would narrow it down to is Jamal Mashburn, just because of the time that he was here, where Kentucky was on probation when he first came, and the program was on its knees, and they had almost an immediate revival. The first year back eligible, they advanced to the region finals, where they lost to Christian Leitner.
Yeah.
And so it was an amazing turnaround, and he was the central person to make that happen as a player.
Yeah, looking back through UK basketball history, most people will point to that and say that if the Mashburn recruitment had not taken place, the story might have been quite a bit different. I mean,
I think it might have. I think Kentucky would become Kentucky again, but it might have taken longer.
Yeah,
I mean, that was almost immediate.
Well, as we sit here in mid-October, another basketball season approaching, if you were still on the beat, what is if there is such a thing, a routine at this time? What are you looking for at this time? It's different every year because there's a different cast of characters. But right. What are you looking at? What are you working on in October?
Well, this year is, like, as you know, is different than any of the 41 years I did it, because every player is new, or I think this is right, every scholarship
every
player.
Scholarship player.
And, of course, new coach. And a new coach was always a good thing because it freshened the beat. I think if you covered the same coach for 41 years, you would have heard the stories again and again. And, you would know how he was going to respond, and, it would be harder. But with a new coach, it freshens everything up. It's like having a new beat. And so that would be a very good thing. Once you got past the anxiety of the search for a new coach,
right,
and the fear of being scooped and all that stuff. So now it would be good because you were getting reacquainted with the Mark Pope and all of that, and looking forward to the season.
You went through a few coaching searches during the 41 years. There were some
right.
changes during that time, and from your point of view as a reporter, you almost have to check out anything that somebody sends to you. But how did you try to handle that during a search process?
Well, it was, I tried to stay aware as much as I could of, what was out there, and I don't remember ever. I wish I had been like an insider, and someone like the athletic director would take me aside and tell me. The one time that sort of happened was after Rick Pitino left. Jim O'Brien, if you remember him, assistant coach, he pulled me aside. This was right after Rick was announcing he was leaving, and said, he just told me they're going to hire Tubby Smith. And that was a big relief. The anxiety was much less. Of course, you don't know for sure if that's going to happen, but that was very helpful in terms of calming me down.
Well, looking back at the overall project of the book, if there's a message that you would have for fans as to your goal with the book and what they will get out of the book, what would that be?
Yeah, I had several goals. I mean, it was part of that process of what am I going to do here? What kind of memoir will I have? And one was talking to more than 40 people. And even now I'm thinking, boy, I should have talked to this person or that person. But and I wanted to give it a historical feel and, maybe help the readers relive some of the things that happened and so on. And I also, someone mentioned this to me and it made sense. Maybe there might be aspiring young people out there that want to be sports writers, and this could be a guide of some sort to give them an idea of what they would be getting into if they became a sports writer. And I would have needed that because I was a newspaper reader growing up, but had no inside information about how this worked and how it happened. I had to learn all that as a Marshall student majoring in journalism. And then the other thought I had was I have two sons, and maybe they would get to know me a little better, a little bit more about my growing up and what the circumstances were like. So
when you talk to students, and I know you've had the opportunity over the years to do that, and of course the way news is delivered now has certainly changed a lot. Do you see sports writing as a career in the future? I mean, how would you look at that?
Well, things, as you know, are changing, and maybe change is just the natural way, but they are changing dramatically, of course, with social media and all of that. That when I was doing it, especially early on, the deadline was like, I think 10 at night, something like that. And so I'd tell people, maybe I've said this the last time I was here, if they played a Saturday afternoon game on the road, I would fly with the team and then come back after the game, and then I'd have 3 or 4 hours to go to the office and do my story. With the age of the internet and everything, there's a constant deadline, and you have to. I had to send my first game story like within a few minutes of the end of the game, and then rush down to the post-game interviews, and then come back up and redo the story. So I was there longer, and I mean, it was just different. And, that's the way it is. And I'm imagining that change is not going to end. It's going to continue to change. And that's just going to be the way it is.
And that's, you talk about additional pressure. I know every writer must, you look back at a story and you got to stop yourself from saying, well, I could have added that or I could have done this, because sometimes you just can't. The deadline comes
my
up.
last sports editor in Huntington at the Huntington Herald-Dispatch was a guy named Mike Connell. And he was very, I really liked working for him and learned a lot. And he recommended me to Mike Johnson for the job here. But anyway, one of the things he said was a newspaper reporter reaches a certain important level in their development when they can improve their story each time they read it. Mm-hmm. And I had, I remember thinking, I think I'm getting there.
Yeah.
But it was, I can see that, now. Sometimes, I think readers don't appreciate the fact they would see my name or the writer's name, and on the Sunday notebook, my picture, and they identify me with everything that's in there. And it's really a collaborative thing. You have editors, and, it's not just, and I tried not to have my opinion. They tell you the reporter should not be writing his or her opinion. A columnist can,
yes,
but not the reporter. So I tried to keep my opinion to the side. I remember Woody Page, he's a sports writer in Denver. I was on it was either a radio show or a podcast, and he asked me, do you have a rooting interest when you're watching a game, covering it? And I said, I didn't want to just say flat out no. So I said, well, I root for a good story idea to come to mind. Mm-hmm. And then I root for an ability to execute that idea. But the winning and losing, that's the players and the coaches and the fans to some degree, but not me.
Mm-hmm. Do you still enjoy following sports now in retirement?
Yeah, less so. Mm-hmm. It may be a product of age. I don't know. But I don't, it was always the pros that brought out the fan in me. So I grew up in the Detroit area, so I'm a Detroit Tiger fan. That was the first team I rooted for. And I watched them in the playoffs this year, and that was fun. I sure hope Tarek Skubal wins the Cy Young.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was the pros. College, once I became aware of it, I watched it, but it didn't bring out that emotional fan in me. I enjoyed it, and I like to see drama, tie score, 2 minutes to go. What's going to happen? Yeah. But the winning and losing, I don't get emotionally, especially even the pros. I'm not as emotionally involved as I was when I was younger.
Just your personal thoughts on the career, looking back and seeing that you when you made up your mind that you did want to be a sports writer, to see how everything transpired, to see all these long years covering Kentucky, a long career, not long years necessarily, but a long career. Some of them were long
Some years
years,
were long, yes.
but a long career in covering a top-notch basketball program and traveling the way you did, seeing the places you've seen. What are your thoughts as you reflect on that?
It's amazing to me. I mean, I felt very lucky because I think that there's probably a lot of very good sports writers out there, but they're covering like mid-majors or something like that, and so people aren't as aware. But if you're covering Kentucky and you happen to do a good story, chances are it's going to be read and appreciated. And so I felt lucky like that way. And I know the cliche is that journalism is the first draft of history. And with Kentucky basketball, that rang true on occasion, like the Leitner game or the Tornado SEC tournament, where you felt like you were trying to put together a story, maybe not the story, but the event was going to be remembered for years and years. It was going to be historic, have an historical feel to it.
Well, you'll be at the Kentucky Book Festival, and again, that's November 2nd, right, at Joseph Beth, and so that'll be a chance for people.
I think 9:30 to 5 in the afternoon, 9:30 in the morning until 5 in the afternoon.
And that's at the Joseph Beth location in Lexington, and you'll be there with a lot of other distinguished authors. You are now an author in addition to being a writer and reporter, so you can
Well,
have to live with that
You're
title.
very kind.
The book is called Deja Blue. Sportswriter Reflects on 41 seasons of Kentucky basketball. Jerry, any final thoughts before we wrap up here?
No, I appreciate you having me on, and I enjoy talking about it, and I like feedback, positive or negative. So if anybody reads the book and wants to share their thoughts, I'd be more than happy to hear them. It's available online too, Acclaim Press and I can't remember the other, though, Amazon. And I Google just my name and book, and the Acclaim Press site comes up.
All right. We recommend that you take a look and enjoy going through 41 seasons of Kentucky basketball from the perspective of Jerry Tipton, who covered the Wildcats for that period of time. Jerry, thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you, Keith.
You've been listening to the WUKY Sports Page with your host, Keith Elkins, an exclusive podcast from 91.3 WUKY, produced at the WUKY studios by Alan Lytle. Our theme music is Peanut Butter and Jam by Illogical Bit, available at soundcloud.com/illogicalbit. Subscribe to the Sports Page through iTunes, Google Play, or at our website, WUKY.org.